Ah, that's good. So, last week we focused on the dream and intention in our life by calling on that wonderful wisdom of Dr. Martin Luther King and Jesus. And today, we're sowing the seeds of peace. So it's right in line with this journey. Now, when I was thinking about doing this talk today, the nudge, the inspiration that came to me was to call Marty and see if she would be willing to dance with me on this. And she said, yes. So what we did is we got together on Monday and we just started talking. We sat down and we chewed on the idea for a long time and realized both of us came to this journey of peace and nonviolence quite organically and surprising in our lives. Now, for me, I've had great teachers, awesome experiences. Arun Gandhi came to Maui. Master Shigon Shah came to Maui. I got to meet Mother Teresa, Ram Dass, Alan Cohen, even Wayne Dyer was a member of our church. Just so many great minds that brought forth teachings and values to honor the spiritual journey that opens to peace and nonviolence. And in that, we have a special opportunity today to identify what is that peace in us. So let's start by recognizing that peace in each other and greeting each other with peace.
Peace be with you.
Love you much.
Yeah. Oh, honey.
Mark is my brother. Oh, how wonderful.
I'm Lori. Marty. Nice to meet you. Peace be with you.
Well, good morning, and thank you for joining us. Gary asked me to come and help him, or not help him, but just speak today on violence and peace and sowing seeds of peace and how we can do that in our lives. It came to me because I had studied Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. and understood their work and their lives and what they'd done in their lives, but I understood nonviolence through their lives more through a historical relevance and an academic relevance. But it wasn't until Arun Gandhi came here in 2016, in November of 2016, and spoke, and that day I offered to be his driver and to host him at our home that afternoon. And because he had another engagement in the community that evening, and I thought, okay, I'll drive him to our house after church, and I'll feed him lunch, and then he'll probably sleep all day and get ready, for his talk that evening. But that wasn't what happened. We sat at the table all afternoon and talked, and he told me all about, his grandfather, and we talked about nonviolence, and we talked about the election, because this was 2 days before the election between Hillary Clinton and Trump. We talked about a lot of politics, and we became very good friends, and we stayed in touch. I visited him a couple of times in New York. My children became friends with him. And then in 2018, he called and said, we were talking, and he said, when I moved to the United States, the one question that I got asked the most was, can one person really be the change? Because Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. And people would ask, can one person really make a difference? So Arun started this trip where he would take people to India and show them organizations and institutions and places where one person had started with an idea with no resources, but over a period of years of work, keeping their eyes focused on their goals, their work had changed the lives of millions of people. And he wanted to show others that with determination and with a focus, how people can change the world. And he said, this is probably going to be my last trip, and I'd really like to have it documented. And he said, I'd like for you to go and take a film crew and, make a film on this. And I was like, absolutely, having no idea what I was getting into. And, but we did it, and been working on this film for like 3.5 years now that should be finished this year. And it was just a life-changing experience for me because Arun taught me so much about nonviolence that I didn't understand and things that he had learned from his grandfather. So Arun grew up in apartheid South Africa, and he said that, his life was filled with violence. He was beaten up by black people because he was too white. He was constantly beaten by white people because he was too black. And he was just in this world of violence and hate. And by the time that he was like 13, he'd grown into a really big guy and was working out all the time. And his parents were so afraid that he was going to kill someone because he had so much anger in him, or that he was going to be killed. So they sent him to India to live with his grandfather. And he said, I hadn't seen my grandfather since I was 5 because during World War II, we couldn't travel. And he said, I knew that my grandfather was famous. I knew he was a world leader. And I'm thinking, I'm going to live in a palace. We're going to have servants. This is going to be like the greatest life ever. And he said he gets there and he said, we were poor in South Africa, but we had a floor in our house. My grandfather was sleeping in this tent with dirt floors and cots. And he said that was like simplicity poor. But his grandfather taught him so much over the next 2 or 3 years that he lived with him. And one of the things that he taught him was about the gift, about his anger. And he said, first off, that anger is a gift that we all have. And it is there in us to show, for us to identify that there is an injustice going on or there's a conflict in us when things change. Just like today, you may come in and say, wow, I don't like this circle thing. But is that really an injustice in the world, or is this just something that you're not comfortable with that is an inner conflict with you? But then he said, that his grandfather taught him to discern, whether if it's an inner conflict, how to justify that or how to fix that in ourselves. And he said one of the first lessons that his grandfather gave him, one of the first assignments, was to draw a tree in his tent, like a tree on the wall. And he said, on one side, I want you to put physical violence, and on one side, I want you to put passive violence. And he said, physical violence is when you hit someone, when you're physically violent with a person. Passive violence is when you're deceitful, when you waste resources, when you waste food, when you're not kind to someone, when you don't offer help when somebody asks you to. And Arun said over the next few months, the physical violence, there was really nothing on that side of the tree, but the acts of passive violence was just, he said, I was filling the wall with things that, that I was doing that I knew weren't right in my own heart. And he said that's when his grandfather explained to him that the connection between the two is that passive violence is the fuel that creates anger in a victim. When there's hunger, when there's, they resort to physical violence to steal. That passive violence is the fuel that fuels this physical violence. So to cut off the fuel source, we have to be the change in ourselves. We have to become the change. And the change can't be out in the world until we change in our own hearts. And, and I'd always thought, I'm not a violent person. I'm not a gun owner. I've never thrown a punch at anyone. I've never, been physically violent with people. I've never robbed anyone or assaulted. But, through this process, I realized the passive violence that I was creating. My eyes can be a weapon. If I look at my husband, or if I roll my eyes at a waitress that, isn't doing what exactly I expect of her. And I think that that's, one of the ways that that I've become conscious of how passive violence shows up in my life. And, when you're at a restaurant and you're not getting the service that you want, or I'm not getting the service that I want, and I'm rude to the waitress or I'm rude to the manager, I don't know what's going on in their lives that day. I don't know what is behind the scenes that are causing them to create that. But my job is not to judge that. My job is to stay centered in my life and respond with kindness and patience and mercy and grace. I know this. I fail miserably every day at this. But, these are the things that I'm striving to, get better at. And, maybe one of the things, just the other day, John came in and he's always perky in the morning. And he was like, "Good morning, what are we going to do today? It's going to be a great day." And I'm like, "Can I just have a minute?" And he's like, "You should check your tone." And he walked out. And I went to him and I said, "Today's a day that I just need some patience and some grace." And he said, "Why?" And I said, "Because 5 years ago, my mother died this morning. And I was with her when she died. And all of my thoughts were of that morning and of that grief. And all of the grief was just flooding through me." He didn't know that. He thought I was just being rude. But I was able to go to him and explain it. Otherwise, he would have probably just yelled at one of the dogs, or it would have multiplied with him. And our discussion is how does violence show up in our lives, because we're not murderers, we're not we probably all consider ourselves nonviolent people, but
Yeah.
how does violence show up in your life?
Like you said, in many ways. I do not have a look that kills. I've tried to sharpen it, but if I look at someone and say, "Do you have something in your eye?" No, I'm mad at you. But the anger, the judgment, the desperate need to control no matter what, all of those choices in my life caused me the stress, caused me the pain. How does it show up in your life? How does violence show up in your lives?
And Kathy is our
She's got a
mic
mic.
holder.
Just raise your hand to bring the mic to you.
I agree with you about, I'm not a violent person either. It takes a whole lot to make me mad. When I get there, it's not pretty. But I find over the years that the awareness that I've been working on about myself is judgment. And I'll find myself judging, as you're talking about other people or myself rather harshly. And when I think awareness is the key that helps me get better. I fight it every day. But I'm not a person that assaults or, like I said, you've got to make me really mad. So.
I've never had a punch thrown at me, and I've never thrown a punch. I think my size helps out there. and I'm grateful, because I don't know if I could ever fight. My my passive aggression, it comes from anger, and I'm experiencing a situation at work right now where my job requirements are changing, and I'm fighting that. I don't want to do what they want me to do, and I'm holding resentment on it. and I hold resentment to the few people that are controlling that and not even considering that they have needs that are different in their job in trying to get the results of our department done, and that I need to be someplace else to facilitate those results. So I've been fighting that, and it kind of been eating at me, and I realize I just need to, you know, I may be fighting it to the point that there are some good things that are for me here in the future with these changes that I'm not getting the opportunity to realize. So I just need to forgive and forget and let God go and go with the flow. And this has been a good lesson.
Meditation, it came to me that I really need to work on self-forgiveness about things in the past. Things I don't forgive myself for, I'm hesitant to forgive other people for. Things that I have forgiven myself for, I'm more forgiving to others. So.
I think for me, a lot of the violence comes about with how your self-esteem. If you don't feel good about yourself, you're going to be violent on somebody else. I remember I was more of a disciplinarian growing up with my kids, but you know, before I knew God's love and everything. And once you have love and that fulfillment, then everything's better.
I feel grateful that I have had a healing through this, but I used to have a violent sense when I had a coworker who did something really unjust to me and tried to get me fired, and I didn't get fired, but I found great pleasure in stirring the drama and sharing with other people what she had done to me. And instead of letting it be over, it was like this great source of excitement to share what a dummy she was. And I kept it alive. You know, like it was an incident, but I just kept it alive. And it was, once I finally had the healing, I realized that I didn't want that for her, I didn't want that for me, I didn't want that for us. And we're actually pretty good friends now.
Oh, wow.
Well, I grew up in a violent home, and I found the way to handle that was to run and hide. And as a result, I became quite a very good athlete. I grew up on the East Coast, and girls were allowed to play hockey and basketball and so on. And I kind of continued that through life. I had a little motor home, and things got too rough and too tight. Threw the dog in the motor home, and we took off. But I can't go anyplace anymore. And so I've had to learn to stay put. And I'm having a lot of lessons in not judging, and how do you handle internal anger, and learning to let go and let God. Because what my tools haven't been helping, but letting go and letting God has.
Well, you know, just piggybacking on what Joan said, you know, the universal truths that hold our spiritual universe together, you know, they're love, truth, forgiveness, gratitude, mercy, grace, respect. All of those we possess. And all of those we can possess pretty easily when things are going easily. But one of the guarantees of the human experience is that we're going to have challenges and obstacles with coworkers, professionally, financially, with relationships, with sickness, or with limitations. And those are the times when it's much more difficult to stay on that narrow path of goodness and grace and love and tolerance. Because as we become uncomfortable and have discomfort, it multiplies and it grows into, I guess we seem to take it out on other people and take it out in other ways. And Gary said it beautifully this morning about the narrow road, and I hope you'll mention that.
We're on the spiritual path. And the spiritual path, truth is narrow. The truth is just true. And so as we identify our truth, we begin continuing down the path. Now, at any juncture, we can step off the path. Now, it's not a chasm. You don't step off the path and you fall way far away. You just step off the path. I'm having a little breakdown here. I'm really angry. I'm going to make them pay. And I don't mean pay for my service. I mean, I'm going to make them pay. Those violent choices. And when we resolve that, when we forgive ourselves, when we listen and speak, we're back on our path. And then we continue on our path, always just as far away from our distraction, our reaction, as we are on our truth. Now, important thing to know about being on our path is that everyone is on the path. And what's also true is Gandhi was a master of teaching on the path. Did he ever step off the path? You betcha. You betcha. Jesus, great peacemaker, a speaker of truth. Did he step off the path? Absolutely. There's writings in the sacred book. He got really angry. I would have liked to have been there for the anger. Let's cross those tables.
Flipping those tables.
And we don't need to be Jesus. We don't need to be Gandhi. Those leaders claimed a high truth. We can still be inspired by the high truth of Jesus or Gandhi or Martin Luther King or Nelson Mandela or Mother Teresa. Our role are the role of the masses of Indian people that listen to the truth, that practice the truth, that fell off their path. They made the change. Gandhi just put the call out. He rolled up his sleeves and he did his part. But one person makes the change because they speak the truth loud enough for others to hear. And then we, in our just as we are, doing life on life's terms, making choices. And one thing about the choice is we can choose to sow the seed of peace. We can choose peace each day. But we have no idea what will grow. Maybe on a day of peace, we have a little more calm. Maybe a day of peace we've planted has a family member wake up to their deepest truth, to forgive themselves deeper. It's not written. We're not in destiny. We're just living our life and walking our spiritual journey. And the choices we make enrich our lives or they stop us on our path. We carve a little pothole and we get stuck for a little bit. But it could be that one of us will be a bright light, but chances are we're part of the huge congregation of humanity that's just left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. And it's right there where change happens. It changes on how we're sitting today. It changes on how we go out and how we relate to the people in HEB or our neighbors, or the choices we make in how we're going to show up and be the kind of person we want to be treated by others. Anyone have a comment or question or anything they want to share?
Do you still have something you want to share?
When you say that as we're stepping through, it brings up the guy on the seashore with the starship story, the
Starfish.
starfish story. And he's walking along with a friend, and he sees a starfish that's been brought in by the high tide and left there struggling. And he picks it up and he throws it out in the water. He walks a few more steps and he picks out another one, throws it back in the water. And then there's thousands of them. And his friend says, "What are you doing? You can't save all of them. You're not gonna make that much of a difference." He says, "Well, it makes a difference to this one, and it makes a difference to this one, and it makes a difference to this one." That's what that brought up for me.
Yes.
And one of the things that I've really noticed, or one of the things that I've really learned, is that yes, it's my human nature is to demand excellent service. If I'm at a restaurant, if I'm at a doctor's office and I have a 10 o'clock appointment, I want the doctor to walk in at 10 o'clock, not at 12:30, and or the dentist or whatever. I have those expectations of people, and I always have. And, not knowing whether the doctor's been in the emergency room saving a child or saving someone else or treating someone that's way more sick than I am. But to learn not to make those judgments and to have more patience, because I know, and like I said, I feel miserably with this a lot, but I know that if I snap at the doctor or if I snap at the waitress or snap at the manager, they're going to turn around and snap at somebody else. It's just going to keep multiplying. And the violence that I've created is going to multiply. And I have the choice to either stop it with me and send a blessing and use patience and love and grace as my tools, and let that grow, and plant that seed of peace, because I don't want my violence multiplying in the world.
In nonviolence, and Mary is going to be the next, nonviolence is a choice. It's a philosophy. It's a way of being. And when we choose making that a directive in our lives, then our interactions with each other change. Because I've found that the material things are not as important to me as it used to be. Because the stuff doesn't matter. The stuff doesn't get me joy. What gets me joy today, hearing your wisdom and being here, being able to see the light in everyone's eyes, is a great blessing, because we're not alone and we're in this together. And it's wonderful that we have inspirational readings from Richard Rohr or Wayne Dyer or Martin Luther King, the Bible, Deepak Chopra. I mean, we all have those touchstones, the people we go to like, oh, I'm really getting a lot out of this Christian mystics or the Bhagavad Gita, whatever. We are so blessed to be in a place where we're able to make those choices and find those ways to inform us when we've stepped off of our track. I'm eternally grateful that in our congregation, our policy is that if you have a disagreement with someone, go to that person and voice the disagreement with them. And that's happened to me many times. And when people have sat down and said, I have a grievance, and I listen, and we can talk about it, we realize we have the same values. And from that interaction, each one of those, I have a deeper, more intimate relationship with those congregants who initially came to me with, "You're doing it wrong. You upset me." Yes, I want to hear. I want to hear. And I just love it. So, Mary?
I guess this might be related a little bit to being the one person. Is one of my favorite quotes is, "To the world you may be only one person, but to one person you may be the world." And I've always loved that quote.
That's beautiful. Carlton?
When I look on the pictures of those 4 persons, what is it? What do we see as the common thread that runs through all those people? And it ran through Jesus. Their suffering and their surrendering. That's what I see. And so for peace, you have to surrender. Not to any particular power, but you have to surrender to the peace within you.
That deserves an applause there. That's wonderful.
Beautiful.
My daughter has a master's in political science. So when we talk about politics, she'll say to me, "Mother, remember, change begins at the local level. You don't have to be a big deal. It starts at so that's what, when you said there are only a few Jesuses and Gandhis and whatnot, it made me think about that. It is important to be a change in the local level, in your own household, in your own job, etc.
I really think we need more of this in our world. I spent 32 years of my life in a violent, angry world. I was in our army, and we're taught to be angry. We're taught to be violent. And you don't get away with throw it out overnight. And this has been very good for me today. I try. In fact, I usually get the most angry now at myself for getting angry. So I know it's a challenge because that's who I am. And I really appreciate it. And I think all of us, especially, I'm not no selling, but veterans especially, sometimes we need a little extra help to get over that hump, to contrary to what we've been taught our whole life. And so I really appreciate this today. Thank you.
Thank you.
I grew up thinking violence was a norm. And so there were times when months, years, or even weeks would go by when I would be angry and expressing violent things and not even be aware of it. I had probably years behind me that I was angry and violent and didn't realize it. I don't think I ever killed anyone or anything, but I didn't go around punching people. But still, I know what it was. Now I understand. I have this technique now that I love to drive. I can drive just about anything, and pretty good at it. If I jump in a vehicle, on a vehicle, or whatever I want to drive, and I take off, and if I find myself not
paying attention, if I find myself running up on your tail, if I find myself thinking you're not going fast enough, if I think you're going too slow, it's become such a fast catch for me now. Sometimes I'm not even able to get off my street when I say, oh, I've got to shift. Because even the slightest little, tension can set me off when I drive. And so, but I love to drive, and so I catch it so you don't have to fear me when I'm on the road. I catch it fast. I usually catch it by the end of my street. If I make my street without hitting a stop sign or slowing down, I say, calm down here, buddies. Take a moment.
So much of our violence in the world right now does have to do with politics. And I like the idea that you don't have to be Gandhi and Martin Luther King, but that you can be one person. So I've been working with Braver Angels, and they're a group that is teaching the skills to help us stay on the road. Because the most important thing when you hate the other person because of what they believe, you are not seeing them as a real person. They've stopped being a person that you might get to know. And just like in the doctor's office, you don't know whether that doctor just helped save a life while you had to wait. You don't know what's in someone else's heart until you take a moment to listen, and then you might actually find a way to agree. So I think each of us can be a braver angel and just try mostly to listen.
I guess for me, where the passive violence kind of shows up is in looking and hearing about all the world conflicts that are going on. I see the war in Ukraine and our potential involvement with Russia. I see China wanting to take over Taiwan. I see North Korea trying to take over South Korea. I see the debt ceiling issue in Washington, D.C. I see all these potential situations that can show up in the future. And so how I react to them, I guess, is, if you think that, the two states are love or fear, well, it's certainly not love. So it's subsets of fear. It's anger, it's frustration, it's anxiety, it's, and I think, the answer that I know that works for me is to be in the present moment, to accept what is right now, even though I know it's temporary, and trying to keep in mind that in fact everything is in divine order.
Last week, Gary talked about planting a seed, and we had visited several days beforehand. So when I got home last week, I began to really ponder what kind of a seed would I like to plant. And there were many things that popped up. But one of the things that I thoroughly have enjoyed this week is I actually got the dirt, and I got the seed, and I planted 8 seeds of this, and I planted 8 seeds of this, and I planted 8 seeds of this. So all week long, I have been nurturing these seedlings, and I move it around to the light, and then if it gets cold, I bring it in. And it's been fascinating because I've got about 5 or 6 paintings going in what I would call metaphorically the seedling process. And I began to go, what kind of seedling of thought would I like to put into the canvases as they're birthing? And it's been fun to watch these seedlings, which I actually thought maybe I had killed them because there was no activity. But this morning, 4 of them I can begin to see are beginning to break the soil. And so it kind of reinforced me, kind of what John was talking about. What kind of a seed do I want to plant? And I myself in these canvases really have enjoying what I call serenity. And so I can tell when I'm painting that I'm consciously going, I would like for them to express this feeling or emotion within me, and maybe you may receive this, you may not. But it's been fun to watch how I was caring for these plants that I couldn't see anything. I mean, the soil looked like it was soil. There was no movement at all. And then this morning, I can just see little green things beginning to just barely break the surface. And at the same time, I can see the same sort of metaphor happening with the canvases. So if you haven't planted, I would encourage you, get your soil, plant a seed, whatever that seed may be peace, it may be whatever, but it's fun to watch. I'm finding it fun for me to watch how I'm nurturing and giving it a little bit of soil and moving it and bringing it in. And so I'm consciously making an action about that seed of something.
And I think that's so important because that's, Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. and Mandela and Mother Teresa, they all had focused intentions of the seeds that they were planting on, the outcomes that they wanted. Tom planting his seeds, he can't just plant the seeds and then never look at them again. He has to nurture them. He has probably some hope for what they become. And I think as we become more conscious of violence and nonviolence and how to live, nonviolently, then we are given the opportunities, from the universe to plant seeds of peace, whether it's to work with Family Promise, whether it's to engage with Braver Angels, whether it's to bake cookies or send a card to someone that needs encouragement, to reach out to a neighbor that may need some help with something, but just to continue to put more goodness in the world, like Tom's flowers that are going to come and the paintings that are going to come are going to foster goodness that he's never even going to probably understand in his lifetime. It's going to be far beyond what he ever knows will happen. I was in my cardiologist's office a couple of weeks ago, walked in, there was a Tom Ricks print in the waiting room. And I'm like, look, Tom's in my cardiologist's office. So you probably didn't know that.
Well, this has really been a rich experience. Thank you for sharing your heart, your truth, and I just celebrate what we can do together, and it's a testament to how we enrich our lives by coming together. So I feel like we could continue this conversation for hours. It's very comfortable. But in honor of our time, let's bring that to rest.
Put a little love in your heart.